2,000 years ago, roughly half the population of Rome dealt with something modern history books almost never mention. No pads, no tampons, no pain relievers we'd recognize, no real medical understanding of what was actually happening inside the body, just a mix of folk belief, half-right medicine, and whatever materials were on hand. And yet life didn't stop. Women still worked, cooked, shopped, worshipped, and ran entire households while managing something we barely talk about even now. So how did an ordinary Roman woman actually get through that week? In a world with none of the products we consider basic necessities today. The honest answer is stranger, more uncertain, and more revealing than you'd expect. And it says a lot about how Roman society saw women's bodies in general. Here's the first surprising fact. We don't actually have much direct evidence of how Roman women managed their periods day to day. Almost nothing survives written by women describing their own experience. What we have instead comes almost entirely from male writers, doctors, naturalists, and philosophers describing menstruation from the outside, often through a lens of superstition rather than biology. That gap matters. It means a lot of what we think we know is really what Roman men believed or claimed, not necessarily what Roman women actually did. Good historians are upfront about that gap instead of pretending it isn't there, and this video will be too. But here's the strange part. The things Roman men did write down reveal an enormous amount about how menstruation was viewed, as something powerful, dangerous, and slightly mysterious. Roman medicine ran on humoral theory, the idea that the body was governed by 4 fluids that needed to stay balanced. Menstruation in this framework wasn't just a biological process. It was seen as the body naturally purging excess blood, keeping a woman in balance. The most detailed surviving Roman-era medical writing on this comes from a Greek physician practicing in Rome named Soranus of Ephesus. His work on gynecology is one of the only detailed medical texts from antiquity that discusses menstruation directly, covering when it should start, what counted as normal, and how doctors of the time tried to regulate irregular cycles using diet, bathing, and herbal treatments. And then there's Pliny the Elder, a Roman writer who compiled an enormous encyclopedia of natural facts, many of which were, to put it generously, not facts at all. Pliny claimed menstrual blood could dull mirrors, blunt knife blades, kill bees, make wine turn sour, and drive dogs into a rage if they tasted it. None of that is true, but the fact that a respected Roman writer recorded it seriously tells you something important. Menstrual blood wasn't treated as a neutral bodily fluid. It was treated as something with almost supernatural power, dangerous in some contexts, and in others oddly believed to have protective or medicinal uses. So if Romans genuinely believed this blood could do all that, how on earth did women manage it practically every single month? This is where the evidence gets thin, and historians have to be honest about that instead of guessing with false confidence. The most widely supported idea, based on general practices across the ancient Mediterranean world, is that women used reusable cloth or wool, held in place with a simple wrapped or tied undergarment. Wool in particular shows up elsewhere in Roman medical writing as an absorbent material used for wound dressing, which makes it a reasonable, though not directly confirmed, candidate for menstrual use as well. There is no solid archaeological or textual proof of a standardized Roman product the way we might imagine a Roman pad. No factory-made items, no dedicated shops that we know of. This was almost certainly handled at the level of the household, improvised, washed, and reused, the same way most fabric was reused for everything in the ancient world, because textiles were expensive and labor-intensive to produce. For wealthier women with private space, water access, and household servants or enslaved women to help with laundering, this was manageable if not comfortable. For poorer women working in shops, markets, or fields, often standing for hours in public view, it's reasonable to assume this was significantly harder to manage discreetly, though we don't have first-hand accounts describing exactly how. And this is where things get interesting, because managing the physical side wasn't the only challenge. There was also a social one. Across much of the ancient Mediterranean world, menstruation carried religious weight, often tied to ideas about ritual purity. Some ancient sources, Greek and Jewish sources are the clearest on this, describe restrictions on menstruating women participating in certain religious rites or entering specific sacred spaces. For Rome specifically, direct evidence is less detailed, but Pliny's writing about menstrual blood's supposed destructive power strongly suggests Romans, too, associated it with a kind of ritual danger, something that needed to be managed carefully, kept private, and possibly kept away from sacred objects or ceremonies. We shouldn't assume every Roman woman experienced heavy shame or exclusion every month. Sweeping claims like that go beyond what the evidence actually supports. But the pattern that does emerge is one of concealment rather than open discussion. Menstruation appears in Roman sources mostly as something to explain, categorize, or warn about, almost never as something a woman is shown speaking about herself. So life didn't stop, but it likely came with a layer of quiet, unspoken management that simply isn't well documented, because the people experiencing it weren't the ones writing the histories. Here's an interesting wrinkle. We already know Roman baths were central to daily social life, for men and women alike, though often at separate times or in separate sections. So what happened when bathing culture met menstruation? Roman medical writers, including Soranus, actually recommended bathing as beneficial during menstruation, believed to help regulate the body's balance. That's notably different from many later historical periods in Europe, where bathing during menstruation was sometimes actively discouraged. But practically speaking, communal bathing during a period, using cloth-based methods with no adhesive or secure modern design, likely required real care and timing. Again, we don't have a woman's diary confirming exactly how this was navigated day to day, but it's a vivid example of how something we treat as a purely private modern-day logistical question was in Rome, tangled up with medicine, architecture, and public social life all at once. What about pain? Roman medicine had no equivalent to modern pain relievers. Soranus and other ancient medical writers describe treatments involving warm baths, herbal preparations, and dietary adjustments meant to ease menstrual discomfort, some of which, by pure coincidence, may have offered mild relief through warmth or relaxation, even without real pharmacological power. Beyond that, women likely relied on rest where they could get it, or simply pushed through the day, the same way most ancient people managed most physical discomfort, without much choice in the matter. Step back, and this whole topic becomes a window into something bigger than menstruation itself. It's a window into how much of ordinary women's daily experience in Rome simply wasn't considered worth recording. We have detailed Roman writing about senators, wars, architecture, and law. We have almost nothing in a woman's own words about something that shaped roughly a quarter of her adult life, month after month, year after year. That absence isn't neutral. It reflects whose experiences Roman society considered historically significant, and whose were treated as private, unremarkable, or simply beneath serious written record. So how did ancient Roman women handle their periods? The honest answer: quietly, practically, with reused cloth and wool, folk medicine, and a culture that treated the whole subject as something between a medical curiosity and a source of superstition, while the women actually living it left us almost no words of their own. It's a reminder that history isn't just what got written down. It's also everything that didn't, the ordinary, physical, monthly reality of half the Roman population, managed in silence without complaint because there was no other option. 2,000 years later, we have pain relievers, modern products, and open conversation Roman women never had access to. But the basic experience, the discomfort, the discretion, the quiet daily management of something completely normal, connects an ordinary Roman woman to women today more directly than almost any other part of this story. So the next time you picture a day in ancient Rome, remember, it wasn't just senators and soldiers keeping that city running.